It's Wednesday, May 8th, a little before 8. Just finished my breakfast. It's 45 grams of protein, 10 grams of fat, and about 80 grams of carbs. Got back buys and some delts today. I think I'm going to hit up. I've just been going to TrueFit, cause I have a couple gym memberships, but let me just grab this. But yeah, I just have the True one that I've been going to. I have Crunch too, but Crunch has been kind of it's been way too busy, honestly. Ooh. I think the topic today is going to be over your mental health and your creativity. Yeah, that's going to be the topic of today. In particular, just kind of discussing the unhealthy things that I would kind of do, and just the weird mindset that I kind of developed the longest time that didn't really help anything. All right, guys. So first up, we have some parallel grip lat pull downs. As you can see here, my arms are parallel. That's why they call it that. Important things to consider here. I'm going all the way up, so that means that I'm letting my scapula retract fully. This is going to provide the most growth stimulus. Another thing, towards the end, you can kind of see that my form starts kind of degrading and I start going into partials. This is kind of okay for lat pull downs just because it's that bottom range of motion. It doesn't have a whole lot of growth to it. It's really just that top range. So it's kind of a good idea to do partials on those in particular, just because it's really growth stimulating. And if you're trying to really grow your lats out or your teres, this is really good for that. So next up on my back day, I have these seated underhanded rows. These are a relatively new addition to my mesocycle. Basically kind of like a seated version of the underhanded row, but it's obviously on a cable. You kind of treat it the same way you would with any other kind of cable row, where you're letting it kind of retract all the way, but you're also trying to keep your spine fairly neutral. There's going to be a little bit of flexion in there anyways, especially whenever you're kind of pulling back and all that. So that's kind of unavoidable. But again, let it stretch all the way out, explode up, and then whenever you're going back down, you let it pull all the way. And as you can see here, the faces I make get gradually more ridiculous. Hate to break it to you folks, but the harder you try and the closer to failure you get, the weirder faces you make and the more sounds you make. I don't know. Dumbbell pullovers. I'm gonna have to blur this lady's face out. Kind of the same principle that you've seen in my other pull down video on social media. You really want to go for the stretch and you really want to control that descent down. For this type of movement, it's not super uncommon to have to go into really high rep ranges. In particular, especially if you're at that bottom of the stretch and you're using a really heavy weight, that might be your shoulder. Progression on it isn't really adding a whole lot of weight to it. It's more seen in your reps. I feel like I've been at 65 pounds forever on this movement, and I've had them in for at least 3 or 4 mesocycles now. And the next one that I filmed are these rope twist curls. So kind of like all the movements, you explode up, control the way down, look for that stretch. Some important things to kind of consider with this movement. If you notice at the top, I flare my hands out, and that's to kind of get that full stimulation to the biceps. This movement in particular is more for your brachialis, not so much for your bicep. It still stimulates your bicep a little bit, but not as much as an
an actual curl would do, or even better would be like, one of those incline curls. But I have it in on one of my curl days, on one of my bicep days, along with hammers, just to kind of get that brachialis a little bit bigger and maybe pop out, make my arms pop a little bit more. Another important thing to remember about this one is to go with pretty light weights so that you're able to do that full flare at the top. And then sometimes at the end of it, I feel like I don't have as much of a pump that I want. And so a lot of times, like, I'll kind of like finish off with partials to really get my arms pumped up a little bit more. And from there, I usually get to move on to the next movement that I actually did not record. Okay, so the next ones that I have up are these side cable shrugs. If you've ever used like a trap bar or something like that, you notice that it kind of have my arms out to about that angle. That's the angle that you really want to kind of target for like your traps. There's a couple downsides to this movement though. A lot of times the weights that you'll need are going to be pretty heavy, and since that cable machine is, a constant tension, it's kind of a force you have to like constantly fight with. So it's a little less great in that regard. The other thing is that since you're kind of like standing and you're not really supported on any other side, you gotta really watch the body English. I didn't realize how much body English I was kind of throwing into things until I actually watched this back. So that's something I need to personally work on, is not having so much dang English in that, because it's a trap movement, not like a spinal rector movement, right? Okay, we're back. So today we're talking about creativity and health. So this is kind of like a really close topic to me, just because like obviously I'm a working creative, and if you're like any like kind of like digital artist or anything like that, you spend a lot of time sitting down, eating junk food, not really doing a whole lot of stuff in general, right? Other than, trying to work and all that fun stuff. And then on top of that, whenever you do work, sometimes, there's like alcohol, there's like junk food, that kind of thing. So it's really not super conducive to like the most healthy lifestyle. That kind of comes into play like in a few different ways. One of it's going to be like your overall health, more of like your physical things that can go wrong. The other thing is going to be like your mental health, and that's going to be, I feel like it's a dance that we all kind of play as creatives, in particular, just because for a lot of us, we kind of rely on our mental health being negative. So in what ways does not really paying attention to your health, how can that affect your work? Generally, what most of us kind of care about, we just really kind of care about just being able to work. The obvious issue is if like you're kind of sick all the time, it's going to be really hard for you to work, if you can work at all, even really. So that's going to be kind of like the obvious thing, because your performance can suffer in a few different ways. Obviously, if you're sick off and on, like that's going to slow down projects and that kind of thing. Some people are more accepting of it, but also like at a certain point, it's not something you should really be putting people through, especially if they're like paying you for, a job. But what happens whenever we're like actually taking care of our health as creatives? Our productivity actually tends to go up. This is kind of like starting to dip into like the next section a little bit. My productivity output like increased a lot whenever I got more healthy. Whenever you're able to have like those synapses in your brain fire off like they're supposed to, and like things are running more like they should, you just work faster, you make better decisions. It's a lot easier to get projects done. And kind of going into the next part is going to be like your mental health. So many of us creatives play that game where it's like we almost rely on being like upset so we can create something, or we kind of rely on those tragedies in our lives to like really dip into. And I'm not like knocking that at all, because like I kind of do the same thing, not to the same extent that I did in the past. In the past, like it would completely like wreck me. Like I would kind of like become the emotions that I was like trying to like convey and all that. And so like it's like, yeah, I made a record, but also like, for like the next 2 weeks I was like kind of like the worst person to be around. So and that can affect your work in other ways too. I mean, if you're just kind of like not someone that a lot of people want to be around, like because you just kind of, you're always kind of like bringing down the atmosphere, that is going to affect your work, you know, mainly by the reason that most people aren't search out for you unless it's like this very niche, like say you're just like, you know, really depressed all the time and you make like these really dark things, but they're like awesome, you know, people are only going to really search out for that, which I guess is cool. And if that's the only kind of art you want to make for the rest of your life, great, you know. But I mean, there's so many projects out there that could really use you for like different things, to be honest.